Thank you everybody for attending today. Our webinar is going to cover, as you can see right here, revision control in Onshape. So we'll, first of all, talk about Onshape in more of a general term. Onshape is based totally in the cloud. Everything we do is in the cloud. The only way that we access it is through a browser. So we could have a browser on a laptop, browser on a tablet. We can use Chrome or Firefox or any other browser to get at this. Now, what do we get at? There's certainly CAD capabilities there. We can access it. Tony or Anthony just mentioned about accessing it through your phone. We can do task management, administration. All of the capabilities you would need for a product development system are in the cloud. What we're going to talk today really comes under the heading of workflow. Once we start generating all this information, we want to manage it, right? So it does that. And then also we want to manage it, how it flows through its life cycle, right? We start off, it gets more mature, it gets reviewed, gets released to manufacturing, things like that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. If I select on this, we can talk about it real quickly. This is the built-in release management workflow that's in Onshape. So everything that we start when we create some parts, drawings, assemblies, whatever, it kind of is headed in the state of in progress. Then we can either release that, it can either go through an approval process, or maybe it doesn't need to be approved. Why would it not need to be approved? Maybe because it's a purchase part, right? And we don't really manage the revision of that, but we want to include it in along with the rest of our product. Or maybe some documentation or something like that. But anyway, if we do go through approval, it gets marked as pending, and then it can either be released or rejected depending on, if we like it or not. And if it's rejected, it just goes back and we can continue to work out the bugs until it's to the point where we do like it. So let's kind of visit this using the software. This is Onshape. When I log in, this is my home page. So what it does for me is it shows me things that I've worked on recently. Below here are different folders that either I have created or people have given me access to. And these are then other ways of organizing my information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a product that's kind of in the prototype phase. We've got the main portion, the geometry finished, and we're going to pick it up there. So that's this sort of a handheld or, countertop manual food processor or a chopper. So as you can see, the way that Onshape works is all the CAD functionality is across the top for creating revolves, extrudes, chamfers, rounds, shelling things out. We can create sheet metal components and a variety of other types of features to generate the geometry we have here. What we're looking at is what's called a part studio. Part studio is sort of like an area where we have all the information we need for a particular product. In this particular example, I have the geometry here. I also have an assembly, and I can make drawings and things like that. I can also include other documentation that goes along with this. What we're going to do is kind of, as I mentioned before, kind of pick this up at the point where our product is pretty much to the point where we like it, and we're going to say, well, let's try to release this as a prototype. So in our company, we're going to go through a couple of stages. We're going to go through a prototype stage. Once that gets approved, we might kind of refine it, add some more things to it, and then we're going to do kind of a release to manufacture. And then that is what gets released to the shop floor. So first of all, talking about this, everything that is done in Onshape is all the history, everything that you've created is here. We can always go to any point of that history and revisit that. We can make that our current point of reference if we want. In this particular case, we can also create versions. So we're going to be doing revisions today. So that's really a major change in a product's life cycle, where it might go from, like I said, from maybe in progress to being a prototype, and then maybe from prototype to being released, and then maybe from release maybe to be obsoleted later on in its life. So those are the major steps that we might define for a product's life. Versions are kind of snap points or snapshots in time at different points in its history that we want to be able to refer back to. So for instance, right now we've got this developed to a point where I'm going to say, let's just make a version here, and we'll call it version 1 prototype. When I say create that, what we'll see is in the history tree, now we've got a prototype version. So as we're looking through the history, say at this point, it was really at the point where we say it is a prototype. And at this point as well is I'm going to want to release this. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is we're right now in the modeling section, right, where we're creating the geometry. I also created an assembly of this. This is a multi-part or multi-body CAD package. So we can create multiple bodies in the same, essentially in the same part, but then we can assemble those into other parts, or in this case, I put them all together in this assembly. Of course, if we have an assembly, we have a bill of materials, so we can see the names of the different components, their quantities. We have a part number. Maybe I'll move this over a little bit. And we also have what revision they're in. So all this information is either being pulled from the part or it can be pushed into the parts that we have here in our assembly. And this is the same bill of material we're going to see in a drawing when we create a drawing for this. But at this point, we have our kind of point in reference where we have our prototype ready, and I can just come to this assembly and I'm going to say I want to release this. Right? So come up here, it grabs all the components in our assembly, and we can see the first release it's going to be is A. And one of the nice things with Onshape is it has a built-in part numbering system. And so that will automatically generate the part numbers for us. We specify if there's a prefix or how many characters are in it and things like that. Or I can just type in a part number if I wanted to do that. In this case, I'm going to let the system generate it for me. So that's just another nice thing with Onshape is the ability to automatically number parts. One of the things that's important is when we create a revision, it does need a part number. That's what sets it as being a unique entity in the world of Onshape. So I'm going to say generate a part number here. You notice here we have prefixes set up, so if we can kind of tell the difference between parts and assemblies or drawings or even files. So we've generated a part number for each one of these. It's going to be revision A. For the release name, let's just call it, I don't know, like prototype release. I'm going to put some notes in here for anybody that's reviewing it, and I'll just say, you know, that it's ready to go. Now the thing is who is going to release this? I could release it myself, right? But we're going to go through a process. I can assign a variety of different approvers to this. I could assign a team of people, maybe the engineering group, the manufacturing group, or the quality group, marketing, whoever, or I can assign individuals. In this particular case, I'll go in, I'm going to say, let's assign somebody in our company. I'll start to type their name in. We've got a couple of Nicks in our company. I'll say, let's assign it to this Nick. And we can also assign observers. And observers could be people that are just kind of included along in this release process, but they don't have any effect other than just observing. At this point, I'm going to say, I want to submit this. So I'm submitting it to Nick in our company. When that gets submitted, Nick gets an email saying that you are now included in part of the review process. Now, the thing is that Nick is not in the building right now. He's out. So here's his cell phone. So I'm sharing my cell phone with you right now, and it's just saying that he's gotten a new pending request. So we can see that here. The first thing down here was that this document was shared with Nick, right? We can't have him approve or review this until we've shared it with him. So the first message was this document is shared with you, and now the release of the prototype requires your attention. So I'm going to be Nick. Think about in your company how often you've had to wait for somebody to either approve or review something. It's sitting on their desk, it's sitting in their inbox, you're sending them emails trying to prompt them to move along. This can go to their phone. They can take place and make use of design reviews, or in this case, release process, just from their phone. So it's very easy for them to get at it, to do the required work, and for the whole process to continue on quickly. So Nick, taking a look at this, he's going to look at the prototype. He sees the release note, says ready to go. You can either accept and release it now or reject it. He wants to look at exactly what's going on here. So we're going to hit details up here. We can see the different components this is made up of. I'm going to select on the assembly itself so we can take a look at that. You can see the assembly name, the part number, its pending state down here in the bottom. One of the things we want to do is let's open it up and take a look at that assembly. So on my phone, I can see the assembly. I can spin it around. I can zoom in, zoom out. One of the things that we might want to do before I, give this a thumbs up or a thumbs down is I'm just going to do a section cut through it. And I'll start dragging this down. Let's drag this guy down a little bit. One of the things I first of all notice is this is like a solid part. The rest of it looks good, right? As I'm cutting through it, this all looks good. They haven't even shelled out that part. I'm sure that's not the design that they wanted. This is just something that was overlooked. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, take a look at this request that was sent to me. And I'm going to put in a comment, if I could spell, shell out, shell the top. All right. And with that, I'm just going to reject it. So now I'm done with my part. I'm going to move Nick's off to the side here. And I get a message as well. So everybody's getting emails. This is a great communication tool. But right here, this has popped up. And I can take a look at it and say release prototype has entered the workflow and it was rejected. It's like, oh, geez, what's wrong with that? So I can take a look at it. I could have taken a look at it from here. What I'm going to do is I can even look in the history here. Now you notice that there's an icon here for the prototype release, and it's a triangle that's clear. It's white in the middle. So that means it's a release candidate. It means it hasn't been released yet. It's in the process of being released. So it hasn't been fully released. I can right mouse button on this, and I can see that it's been rejected. I could select on this, and it gives me the information. I can look at the comment history, and it says shell out the top, and Nick can't spell. Well, it's actually the spell checker kind of ruined it for him, said shield. But I understand that he needs to shell out the top. So I'm going to close this out and say, okay, I think I can fix that. So I'm going to go into our part over here, and I'm just going to say, let's isolate him. I want to work just on him, but I want the other parts there as well, so I can kind of see those in a transparent fashion. But let's go in and shell out this part. So now we know he is completed, and we've got our prototype in a much better state. So at this point, I don't have to regather up all of these parts again. And these could be multiple parts. It could include some other documentation and things like that, kind of our release package. What I'm going to do is just go over here and say, let's go back to this guy. And there's a button here. If you can see that his name is in red, that means it was rejected. If it was accepted, if it was released, it would be green. But if I put my mouse over it, it's also indicating back to me that it was rejected by Nick. But I can use this button called clone. It's basically resubmit. I want to resubmit what I've done. I've made some changes, and let's resubmit this. And it says, okay, here's your resubmission. We're going to keep it at Rev A because it was never really approved yet. Keep all the part numbers. And my release notes, I can just say that it's, it's fixed now. And again, I'm going to send this over to Nick so that he can take a look at it, and I'll say submit. So that's been sent to Nick. Again, he gets another email and an indication on his phone. So bring over his phone over here.
Bill, something to keep in mind when we're showing the phone is when someone's accessing it on a mobile device, they actually can use the speech to text that's built into mobile devices by using like the little microphone on the keyboard. So you could just talk to your phone and rattle off a whole paragraph and hit go, which is a really handy feature.
Really good point too, Anthony. And we could also, I'm using an iPhone, I could use FaceTime. We could be talking back and forth and going through this at the same time. So it's just another app, right? It's great. So let's take a look. He's now got another request for release. He can go through and review it again. Let's look at the details just to make sure, because we don't really trust Bill too much. We're going to open this up. And again, we'll kind of zoom in and say, let's do a section on this. Yes, finally, they fixed it. So we can come back here and say, now that that is looking good, I can release it. And I can put in a comment, you know, looks good or something like that. So we want to document things as we go through. So we'll say release it. I just hit the little green button. It's taken very little time from me. I could have been, you know, out to lunch or, you know, in a meeting, on a break in a meeting, just go in real quickly, do the little work that I had to do here, and it keeps the process moving forward, the product development process moving forward. So now this has been released. We got another message up here because this is a great communication tool, and we can see that the state is now released. We can certainly review that in our kind of a history tree over here. Let's kind of refresh him for a second. And we can see that it's now filled in, right? And if I right click on this, we can see that, yes, it was released, whereas previous to that, it wasn't. So we're capturing the history of really the development of this product as it moves along. The next thing that I'm going to do is, now that our portion of the prototype is here, I'm going to add some more things to it to kind of more fully evolve our part here. So the first thing I want to do is, in the assembly, I want to add basically the part's going to chop up the food. So I'm going to say, let's insert another component. I'll say, let's insert an assembly. And an assembly that's not here, I could just say something I've looked at recently. You'll notice that this has a little triangle next to it, just like our part did once it got released. This is a released part. So when we put parts in our assemblies, a good rule of thumb is let's put released parts into our assemblies, because parts tend to change. If we use released parts, we know that it's been approved and it can move forward into our assembly. And then our assembly can move forward as well. So I'm going to say, let's bring this plunger in here, and we'll place them over here. And you notice when I'm in assemblies, I can put assemblies together in a variety of different ways. You know, I can mate faces together and things like that. This is actually going to have some movement associated with it. So I'm going to actually put in a cylindrical joint. So I can actually do some motion in this. And I'll say, let's just kind of place this component here. I can also put some limits on this. So, you know, I don't want it to go down any farther than 1.5 inches, you know, because that's really the bottom of the product there. And we can just say we don't want it to revolve in any of the directions. So what that's really done for me and for our product is, if I pick on it now and I drag it, we can see that we can animate it, do its motion. So now we've got this developed. One of the things I could do is make a drawing of it. So here's a drawing. Let's say that we create this of this new chopper design with the added plunger and blade. And one of the things that I can do with this as well is that I can take a look at the bill of materials. I can add some documentation and things like that. One of the things that we're going to notice when it brings in our chopper is it is brought in and showing it in the previous release. There's a little yellow button up here that says it's changed. You want to update your drawing accordingly? Yes, I do. And we can take a look at it at this point. So what it's going to do is going to add those extra components to our bill of material down here. And we can see that the cross section is updated. We can see that it is shelled out here. Our other part, man, maybe we should shell him out too, but we'll let that slide. And we can see different, and I can put in dimensions, but this would be our drawing again with our bill of materials. Now, at this point, I'm also going to say, now that this is good, I'm actually going to make another version of this. And in this one, I'm just going to call this like version 2, and we'll say, let's just say it's ready for manufacture. So version 2 going to manufacturing. So I'm just capturing another point in time where we've developed this. We still haven't released it to manufacture yet, but as we can see in our history tree, We now have a version 1 that was a prototype and a version 2, and then in between there's been some release things going on. So now that we have this, I can go and submit it. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'll just say, let's just release it from the drawing level. So I can just say release. And what it does is it grabs all the components. Now it's going to bump up our prototypes to version B. The existing part that we brought in that was already released, it keeps him at his version A. One of the things you'll notice up here is because this is the first time that Onshape has seen this drawing, it's going to call it A. And maybe I want it to be the same revision as, the same revision as the other parts. So I can just bump this up and say, I want it to be version B like the rest of the components, right? So when we release something, it's going to be a B level revision. You can always, up rev a release, but you cannot down rev one. So this is not a problem. Again, here, since it's a brand new part, I can say generate a part number for this. I could also make the drawing number the same as the assembly if I wanted to do that as well, and not have an independent number generated for that. The release name, I'll just call it like RTM, release to manufacturer. And in this particular case, again, I could send it to Nick. I've been bothering him enough today. I'm going to release it myself, right? So I like it the way that it is. I'm just going to say, let's release this. So it's been released, and now it comes under the official heading of being released. And we see we get a message up here. And if we look at its history, we can see RTM was released, and that it was obviously done by me. So one of the things you'll notice up here is our revision block that yes, the drawing was released today by me. Down here is something kind of interesting. The parts that we added were released. This still says in progress, right? Because when we made this drawing, those parts were still kind of in progress. What we want to do is make a drawing of the released parts, right? So all I have to do is go over here and go to that assembly and say, let's replace it with the released version. So I'm going to say little triangle, remember means release stuff. We want to make the drawing of the released assembly and not of the workspace or the active part. So in Onshape, things are always active. They're always in progress. So even though I release this to manufacturing, I can still continue to work on it and evolve it, and maybe again release it later on as another version of this that maybe some customer requests or something like that have been added. But as soon as I say let's add this to our drawing, so our drawing is a drawing of the released part, you'll notice that everything down here has changed now. Now we can see the state of everything is released and the revision that everybody is at. So with that, that's just sort of a quick introduction. I'm going to tell you one little sidelight of this since we do have a couple minutes left here. How would I deal with, let's say, an engineering change notice, an engineering change order, an ECN, ECO? One of the things that I might do is come in here. This is another webinar I talked about earlier was branching, but at this particular point, I might branch this off and do the engineering change order there, make the changes, and then I would actually release it from that branch. So I'd ask for the release at that point. If once it is officially released, I would merge it back in because we really need a single source of truth, and we don't want to be coming up the main history line here and all of a sudden have a branch, and now that's the main source of truth because we branched off, made a new design, it was released, and now that's the one that we want. We can always take those ECNs and ECOs, merge them back into the main design, so we do have a single source of truth. You don't have to merge it into the main, but just for me, it just makes more sense that when I look for, what is the real deal, because we can branch off and make all kinds of neat iterations on things. But if I want to go to the one place where it is the thing that we're producing, our company's producing, that would be along the main branch here. So just kind of a little sidelight. Didn't mean to digress too much, but something to think about.